Hello, I'm Vincent Kane from the BBC. I think I'm expected.
Good afternoon, sir. Good afternoon.
There are 41,000 inmates in Britain's prisons, sent by the courts for periods ranging from a few weeks to life. Cardiff houses an average of about 500. When it was built in 1830, a time when little regard was paid to the needs and comforts of convicts, it was meant for 270, one to a cell. Today the prisoners must share 2 to a cell, and in some cases 3 to a cell. In that respect, penal conditions have deteriorated. It's an old prison. In the days of capital punishment, executions were carried out here, the last as recently as 1958. There's no longer a condemned cell, but there are unmarked graves close to the football field. Prisoners under sentence in Cardiff are serving today up to 18 months.
And it's that moment, that awful moment when the door bangs behind you, that the prisoner faces reality perhaps for the first time. And since most of us have never heard that bang, and never will, few of us can know what it's really like to be a prisoner and to have your freedom taken away from you. Because it's not just the cell itself, the bare walls and the Spartan furniture, and the conditions, the day-to-day prison routine. Most of all, it's what's locked out when the door bangs. It's the loss of daily life, love, and liberty until the debt to society has been paid. Well, this new government, this new Home Secretary, has reopened the debate about crime and punishment in British prisons, suggested that perhaps we ought to get tougher again with people undergoing custodial sentences. Or is there another approach? Well, here at Cardiff Prison, there certainly is a new approach, a novel rapport between prison staff and the prisoners. And I've come inside to do a bit of time to find out what it means.
On one landing, A4, the traditional barriers of restraint and distance between staff and prisoners have come down. Prisoners are encouraged to approach officers with their personal problems, to ask advice and help in maintaining relations with their families and jobs outside. Officers may make phone calls on their behalf.
The prison officer has very much more to offer than just being the man who pounds the landing. He is the man who is in face-to-face contact with the prisoner. And he is the man who is probably more aware of the immediate problems of the prisoner than anybody else. So it seemed quite logical to us that this is the sort of chap who should become involved with the prisoner. What he's doing is he's taking over, for want of a better phrase, the bread and butter role of the probation officer. The prisoner comes to him with his immediate problems. But we take great care. For example, if a prisoner is involved in a custody case, as far as children are concerned, or a divorce, then that matter would be dealt with by the probation officer. The probation officer has withdrawn into an advisory role to the prison officer.
So the officer can now be a link with the outside world, and most of them are happy to do that. He can find out why a letter's not been answered, if anything's wrong at home. He can arrange a visit, and the prisoners are using the facility as they need it.
I just received this letter now. Yeah. Off my wife. But there seemed to be some mishap with about the VOs.
Many of the problems are of the matrimonial variety, and the prison officer is in a position to be understanding and helpful. All incoming and outgoing mail is censored, so there's not much the officer doesn't know. The prisoners I spoke to were worried about families and about wives.
Hello, is that Mrs. Evans? My name is Brown, Cardiff prison here. I've just had a chat with your husband, Tony, and apparently there's some discrepancy with your visiting orders. But he said, now, it'd be all right for you to come in and see him tomorrow afternoon, any time between, well, 1:30 and 3:30 of the visiting times. Okay, so you've been tomorrow, will you? Lovely, thanks very much. Ta-ra now.
The prison officer must be seen as a disciplinarian because our prime function is security, is to keep that man here until his time is finished. And to that extent, we must watch him. But having said that, he must also act in a supportive role. It is difficult. It makes great demands upon prison officers. By and large, they cope with it very well. There were times in the prison service when, apart from prisoners being charged for speaking to each other during work time, prison officers were charged for speaking during work time. Okay. And then, of course, we began to wonder why we didn't know very much about prisoners. Nowadays, with the amount of contact that we have, via this supportive role as one example, we get to know them very well. There are all sorts of spin-off benefits from this. It brings a prisoner to terms with reality, because it's not necessarily a supportive role in the sense of being sympathetic, because prisoners sometimes run away from problems in the outside world when they come in here. And the officer, by maintaining this link with the prisoner's family, is bringing him face to face with the troubles that do exist outside, and is offering him assistance and advice in how to cope with them when he goes back out.
More than half the prisoners who arrive here are what you might call regulars, but the trauma for the first-timer must be considerable. The young man we now follow was a first-timer. 6 months for assault. The sentencing came as a shock in itself.
I was convicted, brought from the courts. I don't even remember coming through the main gates. It was just a bit of a blank.
Robert Jones, your date of birth?
1/10/57. The shock doesn't really hit you for the first couple of days. I'd never ever been in trouble before in my life. It's the first time I'd even been arrested.
Colour of your eyes?
Brown.
Right, if you'd like to step over there to the...
Unless you settle down and accept the situation, you'll just go to pieces, you know.
185 for the scales. And 88. Right. Empty your pockets into that.
When I was sentenced, they brought me here. The first week was really bad because I had no idea. I'd only of prison, only what you've seen on the television and what you've heard from other people.
Have you anything else in the pockets? Okay, stand back by that.
Right, you got 60 pence cash, you okay with that?
Yes, sir. I came in about 6. You know, I didn't know a clue what to do. I never knew what the routine was at all. I had no idea what was going to happen. They just opened the cell up and that's it. The first morning was, I think, was the worst. When you were waking at 7 o'clock and your door cell is open, and you just really got to fend yourself. I just had to watch what other prisoners were doing and just copy them.
Do other prisoners regard the newcomer with sympathy or what?
Not really. You keep yourself to yourself in prison. I think for the first few weeks I was quite wary of people because I'd never been in before, and I was told, you know, keep yourself to yourself and things will be okay. But nobody bothered me at all.
Do you find the staff here helpful and eager to try to help you along?
Certainly in my case, the majority of the prison officers here have been excellent. I've been trying to retain my job outside the prison, and the help I received is fantastic. I can only put it in that way, it's fantastic. Most of the officers, the majority of them, I think understand my situation and a lot are concerned.
Concerned?
I think, yes. It's an experience that I could have done without for sure, you know. It's taken 4 months freedom away from somebody. It's you know, it's incredible.
You can look outside it and I can say, you know, the train station is to home, and you know, you're stuck behind a wall.
The prisoners on this landing are all short-term, up to 18 months. But Cardiff's also a busy court prison, holding men awaiting or on trial for the whole range of offences, including the most serious. And a man who draws a long sentence, including life, will serve his first month or so here, while he's assessed and a decision is taken about which long-term prison should receive him. At a long-term or a high-security prison, by the way, while the security is much more intense, the daily regime is more relaxed. But prison is prison. You can't get out.
In this prison here, in the part for adults, this was built in Victorian times to accommodate 270. And today we're locking up 370 here, and we have locked up as many as 470, going on to 500, so that you can see. It fluctuates because we don't know what comes from the courts, but we're certainly overcrowded.
And that does create problems for the smooth running of the prison?
Oh, indeed. The more people we get in, the more problems we have. The simple problems of catering, of sewage, of stores, blankets, food, clothing, this sort of thing.
So it sounds as if the only answer in the long run is more prison buildings.
More prison buildings, or some means of reducing the number of people who come into prison.
Three meals a day, breakfast at 7:30, lunch at 11:30, tea at 4:30. And the food at Cardiff is regarded as being good by prison standards. Prisoners prepare and serve the food, supervised by staff. Cardiff's 194 prison officers average a 65-hour week, of which 25 hours are overtime. 12 of those hours are compulsory overtime. If they weren't worked, the prisoners would spend long hours locked in their cells.
The key to lock us up turns roughly between 8 and 8:30 of a night, and then the doors opened again at 6 o'clock in the morning. And I spend roughly, during the day, I spend roughly an hour and a half in this cell. And then of a night, I spend like 10 hours.
A prisoner may do what he can to make himself comfortable. In decorating their cells, most of them share a common inspiration, which figures no doubt in their plans for the future. The window in the wall means a lot too.
The window, it does play a big part, because it plays the outside world into us. You know, we hear the cars and the people shouting of a night. And it makes us think, you know, that we could be out there, but, you know, our own fault we're not really there. But it does bring a lot of reality and a lot of the outside life into it.
Soup on the menu today. Mealtime looms large in a prisoner's horizons. There's not a lot else to take his mind off his troubles. Some sport, an hour's television in the evening, the library. The prisoners are preparing the meat, but every knife has to be accounted for at the end of the lunch hour. The crucial factor making for a relaxed or a discontented prison is the relationship between inmates and staff. The officers suspect the public still sees them as warders and screws.
I think this image has been created over the past 100 years as the current trend goes, from the days of the treadmill through to working in cells individually, whence we got our name, you know, from turning the screw on the loom outside the cell. And I think this is where it all stems from.
The inmates have always been suspicious of us, and I think some of them still are, but the inmates on A4 landing, they're definitely coming around to thinking, well, we aren't so bad as the most of the public think we are.
Our job is to keep them in prison because they've broken the law. Once they're in here, a lot of them may well go out and do it again. If we can help prevent this, then we're doing a social service as well as just being, as you say, turnkeys.
Even though this is a short-term prison, the same people do come back time and again. Does that suggest that there's a loophole in the system somewhere, that there's something wrong?
No, not necessarily, because you can not always really assess the value of the work, the social work that's been done with an inmate. For example, if a man goes out and he has been in the habit of coming back in on short term, perhaps 2 or 3 times in the space of 5 years, well, maybe he will go out and not come back for perhaps a period of 3 years.
A word of advice in the right ear just might stop him from doing the same thing again.
The new thinking now, of course, is that perhaps we ought to make these things tougher, harder, shorter, sharp sentences.
Well, it's all very well giving them a short, sharp shock when they're young lads, but they know very well that when they come into an ordinary prison, that short shock is gone, it's non-existent anymore. And they'll agree with you, and some of the old lags will say, I'd rather see the old days come back. There's a lot of things I'd like to see come back, but there are a lot of things that I think the public, their view of us, I wouldn't like to see them come back at all, because there's no doubt about it. Our image of the public, you know, well, we're the baddies, and I think it'll be a long, long time before the public see us as maybe goodies.
Prison life has changed. There was a time not too long ago when prisoners were set to work picking oakum, unthreading tarred rope. More recently, sewing mailbags was the daily chore. In the tailor shop here, the prisoners are making jeans and overalls. Skilled work, but the finished articles aren't on sale to the public. They're issued as prison clothing. Modern prison is no rest camp. Life here is pretty grim. But it's not as grim as it was, as some of the more experienced prisoners will testify.
Oh, it used to be a lot rougher, well, about 6 years ago. Especially well, in a different prison to this, I've been down one.
Yeah.
The officers, well, they treat people like, well, they did used to treat people like dirt, you know, up there. And this is where you had a lot of trouble. You know, you had your strikes and you had this and that over different matters, like, but so things have changed a lot with the officers themselves, you know. You're not treated like dirt anymore.
Yeah.
You know, you're treated as a human being.
Wherever you had to go, you had to be quiet, you could never speak. But now you can speak, like, you can walk about, you're free to do what you want to do. As long as you don't give the officers any aggro, they won't give you none, you know. But, like, I was in Wandsworth, up there you had to go around with your tie done up, your shirt done up, your jacket done up. You had to polish your boots, you had to do your shoes. You were up at 6 in the morning, like. And yeah, it's a lot easier.
Do you think, I mean, there's talk these days about toughening regimes up, you know, making it short, sharp shock and all the rest of it. What do you think of that?
No, I don't think that would help at all. Not really. I think it could make things a lot worse than it is now, because well, if you start sort of pushing people about, you know, like we are convicts, like, to the officers, well, it's going to start trouble between to both of us. You know, but as it is now, we've got an understanding. You don't get abuse off the officers, and I don't think the officers get abuse off us.
And yet we're left with this question, which everybody is debating about outside. You know, how do you stop crime? I mean,
well, you can't, can you really? If there was enough work, if the bosses would let us work, you know, then we would work. You wouldn't get so many people coming in. It's just that the majority of people in here just can't get work.
As I say, it's my first time in prison. I'm not saying I've just been unlucky this time to get caught, kind of thing, you know. I mean, I've done it due to the lack of unemployment. I've been unemployed, you know. I've got a wife and a child to keep. You know what I mean? So you don't get work, you don't get money. And the only way you're going to get money is you go out and steal it, you know. And that's the way, well, that's how else are you going to get money? Unemployment benefit, you know. There's nothing there, you know what I mean? But what they give you, you know, it's nothing. Not enough to keep a family, you know.
If you went for a job and you was outside, the employer, he asked you, have you been in trouble with the police? It's obvious you'll tell him no to get the job, but he checks up anyway. And as soon as he finds out, he just don't want to know you. After, like, there's no job there.
And that's what tempts you to...
Yeah. This is what brings most of us back inside, like, back in here.
And then the other big loss is the loss of family.
Yeah, loss of family. Like, I got separated now on my last sentence here. My wife, like, and divorced now because of this, like. And I haven't seen my boy in a way, but my boy in problems like this lead up, like. come in places like this?
I realise now, being away from my family, you know, what it's really done to me, kind of thing, you know. I realise now how I've hurt my family, you know, being away from them. So I'm not going to make the stupid mistake again, you know, and possibly lose them, you know. So in one respect, it has done me a bit of good, like. But all it does is pen up your freedom, you know. You're stuck in here, you do as you're told, you know. Do as everyday routine, same thing, day in, day out. You know what I mean? So it's not my cup of tea, like.
The plasterer shop in Cardiff is the prison's pride and joy. The training course here has full recognition outside. The prisoner undergoing the course successfully is assured of his trade union ticket as a plasterer when he's released. Men from other prisons, perhaps nearing the end of their longer sentences, come here for this course. It's often said, though, that there's another sort of training going on among the prisoners themselves, swapping criminal experiences and comparing criminal techniques. Prisons are colleges of crime.
To many of the inhabitants of this place, crime is a way of life, and they will discuss crime. If it's a college, it has remarkably few successful graduates because most of them come back in again.
Although I laugh, but take the serious point. Do you think that this softer approach, pardon the phrase, might be any more beneficial in the long term than the tougher approach of yesteryear?
Well, the tougher approach of yesteryear didn't produce any alarming decrease in criminal statistics, and I don't hold anyway. I think that the staff here would resent the term softer approach. We believe in a form of reality therapy, as it were, that these men must face situations outside, and that as such, the A4 landing scheme, the pre-release scheme that we run here, where we try and equip them for going back into society, is not a soft approach. It's a realistic one, and it's one which makes them understand that they have to go out and attempt to cope with the problems that they failed so miserably at before.
One area of Cardiff Prison is reserved for 100 young offenders. Prisoners under the age of 21 must be segregated from the rest.
And I will join in saying the Lord's Prayer.
It's the young offender, not the recidivist, who poses the problem and presents the opportunity of reform. Quite a few of them are in for crimes of violence, and the Home Secretary has earmarked 2 detention centres, one 14 to 17, the other 17 to 20, where for violent young offenders life will be lived at a brisk tempo from waking to lights out. At these centres, the famous short, sharp shock will be administered. Physical exercise is a way of giving vent to pent-up emotions, tensions and frustrations, and in Cardiff Prison, the adult prisoners, for whom it's not obligatory, volunteer for it. It's this kind of activity which some young offenders will have forced upon them. But the opinion I heard in prison, either side of the cell door, was that it's the length of the sentence, of the deprivation of freedom, rather than the nature of the daily regime that hurts and might act as a deterrent. Little tough guys may pride themselves on their ability to take tough treatment. It's time that punishes. For Cardiff prisoners not on A4 and prisoners elsewhere, the vast majority, the old methods still apply. The May report on prison says old prisons like Cardiff are inadequate. Much money needs to be spent. The Home Secretary was frank. There is no money for prisons. So most prisoners will continue the old lags exercise, an hour's circling of the yard. And we continue to contemplate the vicious circle of crime, prison, release.
I believe that in any form of social work treatment, and I use that in its widest sense, I would include prisons in that. That very much depends upon the toss of a coin, that we don't really know what we're doing. I would think that we achieve moderate success if we can persuade a man to increase his confidence in himself, to acquire some skills, for example, as you saw the plasterers training course that we have here. That if you can produce a man with a modicum of skill, a modicum of confidence, then you have a chance with him. But we have no magic wands in the prison service.
Well, I hope I won't come back in again, but if I can't get a job, I most probably will come back in. Because work is my biggest problem. Like, I haven't got work and I go out in the pubs fighting, sort of thing, and I end up back inside.